All states are going to try to control business through regulatory commissions. And what they're going to do is examine corporations' financial records. They're going to hold public hearings, so much so that by after 1900, they could do even more than that. They could take action. They didn't need to wait for complaints, but they could do things like set maximum price rates for railroad companies. This is not always good. You have elected commissioners trying to carry out campaign promises, and sometimes businesses like the railroad companies are too complex for them to understand. And as a result, things like the railroad industry are really hurt by regulations that are put up. We talked about how, at the beginning, how there's a real goal to try to empower the electorate, to take power away from the big parties and put power back in the hands of voters, to try to democratize government, decrease the power of politicians and increase the power of voters. And some of the ways that is achieved is through legislative changes. In many states, we see the initiative being put in place, and that's where voters can initiate or propose a new law. We also see some states adding referendums. That's where voters can decide on a bill that was proposed by the legislature. So the legislature thinks they have a good idea for a law, but they refer it to the voters to decide whether or not it should actually be a law. And then in some states, not Ohio, but in some states, we have recalls being instituted. And that's where voters can remove an elected official from office. In 1902, Oregon is the first to use initiatives and referendum. 12 other states are going to soon follow. In 1912, at the federal level, we have the 17th Amendment pass, which calls for the direct election of senators. This takes power away from the state legislatures and puts it in the hands of voters. And in 1916, almost all states are using what's called a direct primary to choose candidates, not nominating conventions. Some of the more reform-minded governors of note are Hiram Johnson in California, Charles Evans Hughes in New York, and future President Woodrow Wilson in New Jersey. The most famous, though, is Robert Lafayette, or Fighting Bob Lafayette of Wisconsin. And his Wisconsin idea is really kind of the gold standard of progressivism. He worked hard to improve education, workers' compensation, control of public utilities, conservation of natural resources, regulation of railroad. They're the first state with direct primaries for all political nominations. They're the first with an industrial commission that oversees factory safety and sanitation. And they're the first to use a state income tax to generate revenue. This is a lot more democratic idea or way for government to bring in money than a tariff. Lafayette also, like many progressives, used experts from the University of Wisconsin and creates a reference bureau at the university of some of their ideas. This is going to be copied by other states. This idea of using experts, especially scholarly experts, to help improve government.